Please join me in the responsive reading. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises around you. This cover the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples. But the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look about you. All assemble and come to you. Your sons come from afar, and your daughters are carried on the hip. Then you will look and be radiant. Your heart will throb and swell with joy. The wealth on the seas will be brought to you. To you the riches of the nations will come. Herds of camels will cover your land, young camels of Midian and Ephah, and all from Sheba will come, bearing gold and incense, and proclaiming the praise of the Lord.
Thank you to the choir and John. All right, let us hear these words now from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen where it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. May God add God's blessing to that reading from his holy word. Amen. So this time of year, it's the time to think about New Year's resolutions. Last week, I asked everybody if they made any New Year's resolutions, and nobody raised their hand. That's okay, because most people don't. But anyway, I have a hard time with New Year's resolutions also, because I often feel like I'm setting myself up for failure. Why try to change? It's just too hard, right? But then I thought of one resolution that made a lot of sense. It's one that I've made before and that I try to keep making every day. It's also one that I think all of us could embrace. It's to resolve to stay in the moment. Stay in the moment. Now, our bodies don't have any choice. Our bodies are always in the moment, but our minds are like all over the place, right? Thinking about the past, thinking about the future, thinking about what you need at the grocery store, whatever it is. I think, all my challenges could be resolved if I simply keep my mind where my body is, in the present moment. And when we do this, it's so much easier to be conscious, be thoughtful about every decision we make and everything we do. And to not worry unnecessarily about whatever it is that we're worrying about. If it's not right in front of you, don't worry about it. Easier said than done, right? Yes, I know. Sometimes worry is constructive. Sometimes it's our best teacher if we listen to where it's coming from without letting it get the best of us, right? But more so than not, worry doesn't do us much good. Worrying has no place if we want to be present to ourselves and to others in a positive way. And so being mindfully in the moment, that's my resolution. And it fits really well with those verses, the verses from Colossians 3 that we read last week about clothing ourselves with compassion and kindness and humility, gentleness and patience, and bearing with each other, forgiving one another, letting Christ's peace rule in our hearts, and being thankful. So I share those words again because January is a good month to challenge ourselves to take a wider view of our lives and the world, to explore how God is at work in our lives and in the life of this church. And what better place to start than with those Magi who felt called to follow that star such a long way. So people always wonder, were they kings or were they astrologers? Matthew's gospel never says that they were kings. In fact, the reason why children to this day still wear Burger King crowns at the Christmas pageants has to do with something that somebody thought 300 to 500 years after the gospel was written. People look to the Old Testament, to the Hebrew scriptures, and there's a prophecy that says that the Messiah would be worshipped by kings. And so people said, well then, those Magi, they must have been kings. But actually, they could just as well carry telescopes. Like what if next year's Christmas pageant, they came down the aisle with telescopes in their hands instead of crowns on their head? That would be like, that'd be kind of interesting. We also don't know how many of them there were. Everybody thinks, there were 3. There's always 3. There's 3 on the front of your bulletin. There's 3 in the Christmas pageants. But we don't know. We only know there were 3 gifts. But maybe there were 6 Magi. Remember, maybe 2 brought frankincense, 2 brought myrrh, and 2 brought gold. We don't know. We don't know. But here's what we can infer from the story. They were smart. The Magi were smart. They were open to possibilities. They were up for an adventure. They were learned astrologers who were reading the stars and who could sense God's call. Compare them to King Herod. Herod was the regional king of Judea, which included Bethlehem and Jerusalem. He was closed-minded. He was concerned only for himself and his hold on power. He relied on secrecy, deceit, to try to get what he wanted. The Magi wanted to worship the Christ child. Herod wanted only to do away with him. The Magi were gracious and they were regal. Herod was fearful and selfish. The Magi were in touch with God. They got the message loud and clear, go home by another way. Anybody remember the James Taylor song, Home by Another Way? I was listening to it. I couldn't quite work it into the sermon, but remember it, John? Home by Another Way. You can go home and listen to it this afternoon. The Magi could sense that Herod was only in touch with his own selfish motives. So lessons as we head into 2025. What can the Magi teach us? How about this one? Get a little smarter by brushing up on your math skills. Anybody want to do that? Anybody? No. Okay. So there's a story, and it has to do a little bit with math skills, about this Arabic man. He died, and he left his 17 camels, okay, got that? 17 camels to be divided among his 3 sons. So the first son was to receive 1/9 of the camels. The second one was to receive 1/2 of the camels. And the third son was to inherit 1/3 of the camels. Everybody following me so far? So, 17, as we know, is not easily divisible by 3. So the 3 sons, they argued and argued about what to do, and finally they got so desperate for an answer that they decided to ask a certain wise man to help them. So they found this wise man seated in front of his tent with his own camel staked out back. After hearing the case, the wise man took his own camel and added it to the other 17 camels. So now there are 18 camels. He then took 1/9 of the 18 camels and gave the first son 2 camels. To the second son, he gave half of the camels, 9 camels. To the third son, he gave 1/3 or 6 camels. Got it? That's 2 plus 9 plus 6 equals 17. After all that, he still had his own camel left. You can scratch your head on that one for a while. Go figure. So what can we learn from this story? To be creative, right? Be creative, don't give up. When the answer is hard to come by, go find a wise person and ask them if they have a camel. No, I don't know. So think, who might be helping us to help them solve a problem this year? Is there somebody in your life that you could help solve a problem? It probably won't involve camels, but you never know. So second lesson from the Magi, be up for an adventure, be open to possibilities. My thoughts on this drifted to stories of President Jimmy Carter, who's been in the news a lot this week because he died last Sunday, a week ago, at age 100. And his life was full of contrasts and adventures. He grew up without electricity or indoor plumbing. That's like, wow, yeah. And then he moved into the White House. A lot happened in between, and a lot more happened after. So I remember his presidency mostly because I thought it was so cool that he had a daughter who was in the White House who was my age. I thought, wow, that's so cool. I was like 13 at the time. I think Amy Carter was 10. I thought that was so cool. So President Carter is best known for what he did after he was president, and that's why I'm talking about him now. I'm thinking about his work with Habitat for Humanity and his commitment to teaching Sunday school every week for over 40 years. Now, I've heard this before, this story, and I kind of imagine him sitting in a little Sunday school room around a table, but then I read the details that his church, people would get to the church at 3 a.m. on the Sundays that he was teaching Sunday school because they had to have all the security detail in place, and people drove hundreds of miles to go to his Sunday school classes, and they'd have hundreds of people there. I thought, wow, I just imagined this little class around a table, but no, of course, that's not what it was. And he would shake hands and take pictures with every single person that came to his Sunday school class. Now that's cool. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his decades of untiring effort to find peaceful solutions to international conflicts, to advance democracy and human rights, to promote economic and social development. That's kind of a mouthful. That's what he did. So I thought you all might like to hear, this is an elegy to a quiet man. It was written by a Presbyterian pastor and teacher. His name is Paul Hooker. He wrote it in honor and memory of Jimmy Carter. Goodbye, fierce and gentle warrior, farmer with your hands full of good soil. You grew things. You made your choices for weal and woe, held your power loosely, let it go, asked nothing of others, you asked not of yourself. In extraordinary times, you were an ordinary man, not a hero, not a saint, not a role model. You looked into our eyes and told the truth, as best you understood it. We did not listen. We wanted fairy tales of false greatness, glib promises of never-ending good times, eternal mourning in a land immune to night, lies all, and so you warned us. But comforting calumny is easier to hear than stony facts. We turned away to worship at their shiny altars these gods of glory, greed, and gore. You wavered not an inch from your convictions. Smile undimmed by public humiliation, you went back to planting crops in fields where no one else thought they could grow. Peace in bloodied ground, homes and urban lots, love stretched like a wedding canopy over time and patience and simple faith. Do not despair. The fields you plowed still wait their harvest. See, even now they bear your quiet fruits. I thought that was nice, yeah. So what quiet fruits will we bear this year? What lessons will we take to heart? Are we open to new possibilities? Are we open for an adventure? Will we learn from those Magi how to truly worship and let God mold us and shape us? That's a lifelong journey, definitely. For they must have changed during their long trek across the desert, through the wilderness, just like God's people have been doing for a long time. There's a lot of stories in there about trekking through the wilderness, and that's what those wise men did. I've heard that it's out there in the desert where God is most likely to succeed in getting our attention. So here's to 2025, to desert moments, to lessons to be learned, to precious moments in God's presence. Amen.